Now let's begin our color texture. So as I said in the last lesson, let's go ahead and bring in our new UV layout. So with this creature selected, we'll just go to File, and instead of going to Import, we'll go to Import UV. So we're actually going to be able to update the object that we have selected. So I'm going to go into the referenced files folder of our project files, and you'll see this body UV, and that's just a completed UV that I did that you can bring in, or we can bring in. Again, you can use the automatic UVs in Mudbox if you like as well, but I'm going to go ahead and use these. So let's go ahead and import those. And the vertex ID hasn't changed, and so we can use vertex ID as the match, and then we can go ahead, import that in. I'll let it think for just a moment. So once that's done, we can check out our UVs in our UV view, and you can see the UV layout that I have. And so that's a little bit more human readable than the one we had before where it was all separated out. Again, doesn't really matter one way or the other as far as the painting goes. We're going to be able to do it no matter what. This just enables us to kind of see the result a little bit better. So that lets us go in and import our UVs. Now we want to make sure and check and just make sure that everything else has been retained. So all our sculpted detail, we want to be the same. Let me turn off wireframe here. And so on this guy, I can go ahead and go all the way back up to our top level. Okay, and then we come in here and you can see our UVs are still there. If you don't see your UVs, you may have to recreate them on a particular level. Just go to UVs, recreate level UVs. That'll recalculate those. So we have our material added. So now what we need to do is start to add a texture. Now the textures are going to be located in layers. And instead of the sculpt layers, we're going to go to paint. Now right now we don't have anything here. So each texture that we create is going to be a paint layer that's going to exist here in our interface. So we're going to leave behind our sculpt tools, and we're going to jump over to the paint tools. Let's choose the paintbrush. And if we just click to try to paint, it's going to let us know that there's no paint layer to paint on. And so it's going to prompt us to create one. So let's create one. We'll call this one base color. Let's make it 2K map. So you can change the size here. You can change the format. We'll leave it as is. And then you can change the channel. So the channel is kind of what channel inside of that material are we affecting. The diffuse is going to be the basic color, so we'll select that and say OK. So we've created the paint layer, which exists here, but we don't have any information in that layer yet. So we can come in and select a color if we want to. So if we wanted to select, let's get kind of a desaturated green color. We could begin painting, and let me go ahead and turn off the stamp here. And then our brush manipulation is going to be the same. So I can start painting like that, and then everything else is transparent. This green over here is coming from the material. If we want to go ahead and fill this entire layer with this green color, all we have to do is come down to the bottom and say flood paint layer. So we'll flood it with that particular color. And now it's all completely that green color. That lets me know none of the color from my material is showing through, which is what I want. Now, it's always a good idea to kind of break up the base color a little bit. It's never going to really be one solid color the whole way. And so let's take a look at some of the paint tools we can use to do this. We can actually modify the color that we have instead of painting new color. So you'll see we have the ability to dodge and burn, and then also change the contrast and the saturation with the sponge. And so I'm going to go ahead and use burn, and I'm going to get a stamp here. In this case, I've got this stamp with randomize turned on. You can change how that burn or dodge is affecting, whether it's affecting the highlights or midtones. Right now we've got it affecting the midtones. We can try this out. So here you can see I can kind of paint over this, and it just darkens up the existing color. So it's kind of good for adding variation. Let me turn on mirroring in the X, get kind of a larger brush size, and we're still on this base color. And so I'm just going to kind of break up that green by burning this darker green into the body. Okay, so we can come in here and just sort of adding this real subtle variation across the surface of the skin. And a lot of times the more little layers you build up doing this, the better it'll look. Say you want to add a little bit of variation in here. Come across the front of the chin here. I'm not really too concerned about the lips yet. So something like that, okay? We can also use dodge and do the same thing, okay? Come in here, and then that kind of lightens up areas instead of darkening them. So just kind of doing this back and forth over the top really helps to create that sort of natural creature's skin kind of a look versus just having a solid color in there. Okay, so I can come in and kind of lighten up that area to create a little bit of variation. And you could also go back in with your paintbrush and you could select another color, maybe like something with a little bit more yellow in it. And we could take our strength down a bit, and then you could take one of these stamps and you could begin to add some of that color into the mix. So maybe add a little bit of yellow into it. And we're using our pen pressure along with the fact that our strength is very low to do something very subtle. So, just in this stage, we're kind of just creating that base overall skin, and then we can start to add additional details over it. We can kind of use a similar workflow that we use with the sculpt layers, in that we'll have some control over how those are combined together. We'll have a little bit more flexibility. But for this one, let's say that we want this to be part of the same sort of layer, okay? So it maybe ends up with something like that. We could also, if we wanted to kind of desaturate things here a little bit, we could come in with our sponge, and you can see that's really desaturating everything. So let me kind of turn this down a little bit, and then I could just sort of desaturate in some specific areas. And you can come across and do that as well. Okay, so it doesn't have to be green. You can make it whatever color you want. Just make a base paint layer for the color, and then flood it with the color, and then go in with your dodge and burn, maybe the sponge, and just break things up a little bit using some different stamps. All right, now in the next lesson, we'll take a look at starting to layer on additional colors to this. So let's go ahead and do that next.